Reading with your kids.
Hello, my name is Jedley, and this is a special spooky Christmas edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We've assembled 9 amazing spooky authors from spookymiddlegrade.com, and they are coming together to create an original story right before your very ears. That's right, an original story debuting here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I am so excited. I have no idea how this special Christmas edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is going to happen. I normally tell you, coming to us from all around the world, or at least all around the country. We have the Spooky Middle Grade Authors Group. It's I'm going to let them tell you what it is all about, but we have 9 different authors with us today, and we're going to do something really, really special. So first I want to introduce them, and we're going to start off with our friend. She's been on the show before, and she's done a whole lot to make this happen. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the podcast, S.A. Larsen. S.A. Sherry, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. How are things up in Maine?
Very good. Cold.
Yes.
Snowy.
Yes. Anything new happening in the world of motley education?
Actually, I just finished the second book. It's titled Dead Alley, and it should be out next year.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Kim Ventrella. Kim, where are you calling us from?
Hi, I'm calling from Oklahoma City.
How is everything down in OKC?
Oh, we're nice and toasty, not too cold.
Yeah, Sherry and I are not happy about that. Kim, tell everybody the latest book that you have.
Well, I am the author of a book called Skeleton Tree, and coming in February is Bone Hollow.
Awesome. Hey, Samantha Clark has been on the show. Samantha, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. And actually, I think I won't have been on the show just yet because we've done the recording, but it's not scheduled to air until January. So I'm really excited for when it does.
I am too. Look at that. I've already messed up. Well, Samantha, thank you. Tell us what you and I are going to be talking about in the future that we already talked about.
Let's pretend it's like time travel. We'll be talking about The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, which came out from Simon & Schuster in June this year.
Excellent. Someone I know I haven't spoken with, but he's awfully dapper with a purple hat. David Neilson. David, how are you?
I'm good, Sir Jed. And actually, we haven't spoken. We will be speaking in 2 days. Although then it probably won't air for another who knows when. But so, again, everything's all relative in terms of time.
Well, and what will we be talking about in a couple of days?
I'm calling in just north of New York City, and I'm be talking about my book, Dr. Fell, The Playground of Doom, as well as my other spooky book, Beyond the Doors, the 2 books that we'll be discussing.
Awesome. Can't wait. Angie Smibert, where are you located right now?
Oh, hey, I'm calling from scenic Roanoke, Virginia. And it's a bit chilly here.
That means it's like 60 in Virginia.
I wish.
And what spooky book are you entertaining kids with right now?
Right now I have a book out called Bone's Gift. And then the second in the series will be out in March, and it's called Lingering Echoes.
Awesome. Our next guest is Kat Shepard, and she's very confusing. She's a wonderful author. Kat, tell everybody what book they should be checking out.
I have a series out called Babysitting Nightmares, and book 1, The Shadow Hand, came out last June, and book 2, The Phantom Hour, comes out on January 29th.
Awesome. Sarah Cannon is big, and she was the last person to join us. She's sitting in front of a world map right now. Sarah, can you point to any place in that map that you're calling from?
If I do this, I
okay.
can. I am actually calling from Indianapolis, Indiana. Yeah, and this is my other gig is teaching English to students in China. So you're looking at my classroom right now.
Oh, fantastic. We've hosted a number of international students in our home, and a lot of them come from China. So if you had any hand in teaching them English, thank you very much. Shay Shay. Our next guest is Victoria Piontek. Victoria, how are you, and where are you calling from?
Hi, I am calling from just outside of San Francisco, California. So way on the West Coast, and it's still morning here for us, just barely. And my book is The Spirit of Cacto County. It came out in May. Set in Florida.
Excellent. And I just realized, Victoria, as you were popping up your book, I forgot to ask Sarah the name of her book. And she was so kind. She wasn't even jumping up and down on the camera telling me that I made the mistake.
That's all right. I can do that now. My book is called Oddity, and it'll be out in paperback in January. And then Twist, which is another title I have forthcoming that's a standalone, will be out next January.
Awesome. Cool. And last but certainly not least is one of our good friends, a good friend of the podcast, Jonathan Rosen. Jonathan, good to see you.
Hey, Jed, nice to be back. I'm the author of Night of the Living Cuddle Bunnies and From Sunset Till Sunrise, and I am in sunny South Florida. Sorry for the rest of you.
Just rubbing it in. I know. It's great. Well, it's great to have you all here. But first, before we're going to tell everybody why we're having spooky authors on the show, I want to find out a little bit about the whole spooky middle grade group or collective. Kim, can you tell us a little bit about why you guys came together and what you're doing as a group?
Absolutely. Well, we kind of all came together at the end of October, and we decided, yes, we all write spooky books because we love spooky and it's amazing and kids love it. But the thing is that it's not just for Halloween or October. What we realize is that spooky books are great to read all year round. They cover every genre you can think of. So we just want to get that idea out to students, teachers, librarians, that spooky books are great, not just on Halloween, but all the time. So we're Skyping with classrooms across the country. We have a reading challenge. We're doing all kinds of things to get that idea out there.
I appreciate that. You know, there are some people in the world that think, oh, you only eat ice cream in the summertime. But Sherry will tell you, up here in New England, we eat ice cream all the time, sometimes out in the cold and in the ice.
Absolutely. And it's exactly the same with spooky stories, and especially wintertime. Wintertime, what spookier time of year is there than the dark of winter, right? Mm-hmm.
You know, I just finished last night. My daughter and I and her boyfriend just finished watching the House on Haunted Hill, or yes. That it was too. My daughter's boyfriend just freaked, and you know, every time we watched it, he was just. And the last episode was so creepy and spooky, and it was. It was really, really fun, and it made me really excited about this. And what this is Sherry and I were talking, and I was inviting her back on the program, and she said, hey, I'm part of this really cool thing, and we're visiting classrooms, and we're having free Skype sessions, and we're talking to kids not only about reading spooky books all year long, but also writing books. And we came up with this idea that maybe I could give you all a prompt, and you could create a story together, bring all these authors together and create a story. And the neat thing is, all the authors here today, they've created this story, but just like me and my daughter and her boyfriend last night, none of us know what the conclusion of the story is going to be, except for one author. So we're going to start. Sherry, do you remember the prompt that we talked about?
I do.
Yeah, it was. My niece. I wanted something, a gift for my niece, and Jimena is amazing, and she has fallen in love with hockey. And I thought, how cool would it be if we have a young girl who loves hockey, who's in an arena for the big game, and then forgot something in the locker room, went back to the locker room to get it, and when she came out, that big full arena is empty. What did you guys come up with? Sherry, did you want to start us?
Sure, that's exactly what I did. I basically wrote up your prompt. So I think, David, we need like a spooky moi or something. Give us one. That's right. All right, here we go. Frigid air pressed into Maya as she trailed her fellow teammates down the hollow tunnel. Howls from the packed ice arena echoed off the concrete walls. The edge of her skate blade caught on the rubber mat, and she stumbled. Nerves never got to her, but this was a big game for medieval middle school. The Blue Rats had annihilated them last year, 9-0. Good thing this year Maya had her lucky charm with her. She slipped her fingers under the neck of her shoulder pad to grip onto the amulet. Panic flushed through her body, and she clawed at her neck. It wasn't there. Her grandmother had given her the amulet last month with the instruction, keep it safe, it's special. Maya had laughed it off, and still did, only not right now. Even the possibility of attracting negative energy was out of the question. They needed to win this game. Pivoting on one skate, she raced into the locker room to her hockey bag, and there, on the floor next to it, coiled her chain and Graham's amulet with the weird faces on both sides. It was kind of ugly, but if it helped them win, Maya was all about it. Loud screams muffled through the closed door, and she looped the chain around her neck. It was probably Minda Lou, manager and Nosybody, keeping track of her. Coming, she yelled, and plowed out the locker room door, jogging up the tunnel and tucking the pendant into her equipment. It wasn't until after she hopped onto the ice that she noticed the silence. The arena was empty. And to continue our story, let's go to Kim Ventrella.
Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Maya's heart throbbed in her chest. She swallowed down the panic rising in her throat and glided to the middle of the rink. Her skates cut into the ice, loud in the eerie quiet of the arena. Graham, she said. Her voice swallowed up by the silence. Her heart beat faster, heat building in the center of her chest. What was happening? Graham's stories flitted through her head. Tales of witches that could twist time and steal children from their beds with a snap of their long, spidery fingers. She'd never believed any of her stories. But now? Hello? Anyone? Her words echoed against the metal ceiling. She searched the seats for any sign of life, a hint of movement, and then she saw it. Not in the stands, but higher up, near the scoreboard. A dark shape was hovering in the shadows, floating in mid-air as if suspended by an invisible string. The heat in Mia's chest grew and grew until she realized that it wasn't her heart at all, but the necklace. Without taking her eyes off the floating shadow, she reached under her uniform and took hold of the pendant. It radiated a gentle warmth that moved up her arms and spread through her body. The tarnished silver glowed a pale shade of blue, making each of the creepy faces appear to be smiling. Don't be afraid, Graham's voice said in Mia's head. No matter what happens, I'm always with you. Graham's words and the warmth of the amulet gave her strength. Somehow, the amulet connected her to Graham. Who's there? She said, forcing her voice to sound brave. She glided closer to the shadow. In the orange LED lights of the scoreboard, she could just make out a pale face, watching her from beneath a hood made of rippling smoke. And now, let's go to Samantha Clark.
Dun, 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 dun. For installment 3. Run! Mia's brain screamed, but nothing in her body was listening. Her feet, her eyes, her throat were all frozen. The only part of her that moved was her heart, pounding, pounding, pounding like a fist telling her to wake up and move. Yes, that's what she had to do. She was fully ready for battle with the Blue Wraiths. But this thing? No way! Even with Graham's voice in her head, this was scarier than any hockey opponent she'd ever played and any horror movie she'd ever seen. Going, she whispered, staring at the pale face. Were those red eyes looking back at her or just the glow from the scoreboard? She couldn't be sure, but whatever it was, it definitely wasn't human. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her foot and her foot wouldn't move. She glanced down, afraid to take her eyes off the hooded figure, but she had to. This wasn't just fear anymore. Something had hold of her foot, and she hoped it wasn't just a giant wad of gum. She hoped it was just a giant wad of gum, but it wasn't gum. It wasn't anything she could see. Then she realized her hand wouldn't move either, or her arm, or her neck. She tried to open her mouth, but that was stuck too. Her gut was fully ready to let loose with the biggest scream, but all that came out was a loud, "Ugh." The only part of her body that was still her own were her eyes, and she flicked them back up to the hooded figure, but it was gone. All that was left was the tiniest hint of smoke. She glanced up, down, side to side, trying to find the figure. Where did it go? She wished she could move, turn around. What if the figure was right behind her, reaching for her? Was that wind she felt in the back of her neck? Was it drool? Graham, she thought, what do I do? As if in answer, the warmth of the amulet turned icy cold. And now it's time for David Neilson to tell us what happens next.
It was a cold unlike anything Mia had ever experienced. A searing, bone-chilling, agonizing cold that chewed you up and spit you out. She wanted to cry out in pain, fear, anything, but could not regain control of her body in any way. Suddenly, when she felt she couldn't stand any more, Graham's amulet let loose with a violent pulse of energy in all directions. And just like that, it wasn't cold anymore. In fact, just like that, I can move. Control restored, Mia whirled about in search of the red-eyed phantom. Even as she searched, half her mind was attempting to digest what had just happened. She'd made eye contact with the phantom. She'd been frozen in place. Graham's amulet had become ice cold before blasting out a wave of energy, and she could move again. Did the amulet just save me? She wondered. Was there some truth in all of Graham's tall tales? Was this amulet magic? Her thoughts froze as her eyes spotted the phantom floating down to the ice behind her. She threw all amulet-related questions onto the back burner in order to concentrate on the unholy vision of evil now glaring out at her. It seemed angry, like really angry. Like how in the world did this little human girl throw off my spell angry? Who are you? Mia found the courage to ask. Although, if she was being honest, a better question might have been, what are you? Rather than answer, the red-eyed spectre opened its mouth and screamed. And now, we'll go to Angie Smibert to find out what he screamed.
The sound was like 1,000 snowy white barn owls screeching in the dead of night. Mia had heard one in Graham's barn, but this was no owl. The phantom shriek tore through her and the arena. It was all Mia could do to cover her ears, amulet still clutched in one hand. The ice beneath her skates moaned and crackled. A giant crevasse zippered open before her, and an icy hand, did phantoms have hands? Pushed her hard, sending her racing right toward the gaping maw in the ice. She could feel its hunger. Its icy teeth widened, and the phantom chuckled. Stop, the amulet whispered. Was that Graham's voice? Don't let it take you to the other side. Hockey stop, Mia's brain shouted, and her feet answered. Her right leg instinctively turned so her inside edge began shaving the ice, slowing her down. But was it enough? Well, now it's time for Cat Shepherd to tell us what happens next.
Dun, dun, dun! The blades of her skates shrieked as she dug in, stopping just inches from the chasm's edge. In the darkness below her, she saw only roiling movement as slick, sinewy shapes seethed over one another, rising toward the surface like bubbles in a cauldron. Mia couldn't make out what the shapes were, but the sound of them was like thousands of teeth chattering at once, and they were coming for her. Mia fell to her knees and scurried backwards, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her eyes scoured the arena, searching for an escape. There, across the ice, a break in the wall. Could she make it? With quivering legs, she stood up and pushed off, keeping her stance wide and her center of gravity low, just like she'd learned in her hockey drills. But just as she was about to reach the wall's opening, her skate stuck and she pitched forward, her palms slapping the ice as she skidded across the slick surface. She twisted to see what had caught her skate and found the phantom towering over her, its red eyes glowing with malicious triumph. The sound of its laughter burned into Mia like an acid. She gritted her teeth and squeezed her eyes shut. Please, Graham, she whispered. Help me. The amulet had protected her before. Could it protect her again? She reached for the stone, but her hand closed around nothing but empty space. Now we have Sarah Cannon continuing.
That's when she realized the amulet had flown backward when she fell. Instead of dangling in front of her, it was at the back of her neck, pulling against its chain, facing the demon. This time, she felt a rush of heat and a pulse of outward force. Over her shoulder, she saw the demon fly across the arena and slam into the clear plexiglass wall on the other side. The amulet had just performed the world's biggest body check. That is, if phantoms had bodies. Body checks were totally illegal in middle school hockey, but Mia figured there was an exception to every rule. So far, the amulet had warded off the phantom at every turn, but Mia knew the best defense was a good offense. If she could figure out how to use the amulet on purpose, she could banish the specter for its many rule infractions, including delaying the game by vanishing all the spectators. And now it's Jonathan's turn.
I think it's mine, Victoria.
Victoria's.
All right.
Mia searched her memories. Her grandmother had told her so many stories. Stories Mia thought were just tales to entertain her. Only now Mia knew her grandmother had been trying to prepare her for a moment just like this. She had been teaching her about the amulet and the demons she might have to fight. There was one story her grandmother frequently told her about a demon who collected souls. Her grandmother had never described the way the demon looked, but she had talked about what it wanted. It wanted the essence of the living so it could keep strong. Like a spider, it trapped people and collected them in a hiding place to devour later. Mia wondered if the demon attacking her was the same one from her grandmother's stories. And then, with a sinking feeling, she thought about all the missing people. If this was the same demon, then all those missing people would be demon food if she didn't do something. Worse, if the demon had taken them somewhere to devour, she would not only have to figure out how to defeat him, but also how to save the trapped hockey audience. The demon whirled overhead, threatening her. It was going to attack again, and Mia had to be ready. Not just to defend herself, but to fight. Mia had to figure out how to control the amulet. The demon floated closer and opened its gaping mouth. Mia felt bile rise in her throat. The demon wanted to eat her. Mia forced herself to take a deep breath to clear her head. She needed to stay calm. If she was going to fight, she needed to think. She tried to remember what her grandmother had said about magical amulets in her stories. Mia recalled all the things she knew about amulets. They had power, of course, but what about the person wielding it? They always had to figure out how to control it by reaching deep inside themselves to find the source of their true power. Except Mia wasn't sure she had a source of true power. Even if she did, she only had about 10 seconds to find it before she was demon food.
Without a moment to spare, Mia seized the amulet in both hands and used the surroundings to take shape in her mind and projected them outward. Cold. No, not just cold. It went beyond that. Freezing. Suddenly, several jagged frozen fingers of ice shot out from the amulet and snared the phantom in its grasp. The phantom shrieked for several seconds before the icy fingers curled into a fist and enclosed the phantom in a solid block of ice. Just like that, Mia was back on the rink with a hockey stick in her hands. The roar of the crowd startled her. She realized that she was within 10 feet of the goal and controlling the puck. Go, go, the fans urged her forward. Mia deked left, enticing the goaltender to commit before she swerved back to the right, and with a hard snap of the wrists, fired the puck into the back of the net, sending the home crowd into a frenzy. Mia thrust her arms skyward in triumph, but her elation lasted only moments until the sound of the whistle shattered her euphoria. The crowd groaned as one entity as the referee skated over and pointed to the penalty box. What? Mia cried. What did I do? He motioned toward the amulet, using a foreign substance to gain an advantage. But the referee held his hand up. He clearly had no desire to hear any of her explanations. Mia gritted her teeth and skated over to the penalty box. She stopped in her tracks when she saw, already sitting there, behind the glass partition separating the two teams, was the phantom. Her shoulders slumped and her hood pulled low over her eyes. Mia took the seat right on the other side of the partition. What are you in here for? Mia asked. The phantom shrugged. Stealing souls and trying to devour fans. Mia sighed and shook her head in disgust. I swear they're making the game too soft nowadays. The phantom nodded. Ain't that the truth? The phantom turned to Mia. By the way, I was a big fan of your grandmother's. Best demon-slaying hockey player I ever saw. Mia smiled. Thanks. She studied the phantom for a moment. She didn't look as intimidating as before. As a matter of fact, they weren't so different at all. Say, do you want to get together in another dimension and practice sometime? The phantom laughed. I'd like that.
Bravo. That was amazing. That was absolutely amazing. And Jonathan, talk about coming out of nowhere. I mean, that's...
That was definitely a surprise ending.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that was wonderful. This is fantastic. The whole time I'm listening, and I'm amazed that just in a week or maybe a week and a half, these brilliant authors came together. And as we're listening to the story, there's, I'm thinking as a parent, my goodness, this is reading spooky stories together. Just listen to the vocabulary that kids were hearing today, and the painting of the pictures. I mean, just to begin with, Sherry Larsen, I talked to, my prompt, and she took my prompt, which was just a couple of sentences, and turned it into a masterpiece. It was just amazing. So, bravo, authors. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Kim, tell us a little bit about the process of coming together and creating a story, and how we can do that as a family.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my favorite thing, because this is actually, like Samantha mentioned, this is the first time I heard the whole story all the way through. So it was a big surprise for me. And the exciting part was that you can see how different spooky can be, because each author has their own interpretation. And sometimes it's like dark and emotional, or, hilarious, like Jonathan. I love that it runs the gamut, but families can absolutely do this. I mean, we got the awesome prompt from Jed. Sherry started us off. And then, when I came in, it's like you never know where it's going to go, even when you're writing it. And you don't have to be like an author to do this. You can be a reader, you can be a parent, a child. Anyone can do a story like this, and you can find inspiration anywhere around you. So like you said, like your daughter loves hockey, and so that's kind of like where you got this inspiration. Mm-hmm. Right? So just look around you. Like, what do you see? I, of course, have all of these weird, like, items in my house, little skeletons and skulls. So I can just look in my own house and be like, okay, here's an inspiration. Why is this skeleton wearing a wig? What is the deal with that? Let's write a story about it. So, I mean, families can do that in their own house.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sherry, as a fellow New Englander, you spend a lot of time in the car driving kids probably to hockey practice and hockey games. How much better do you think, as a parent, do you think it is for us to spend time creating a story together as we're driving here and there, as opposed to listening to the current pop song?
You and I have discussed this before. That's one of the things when I was a kid, some of you may have done this. You play like either the car color game where everybody gets a color, and then at the end of your journey, whoever has this many red cars, whoever has the most wins. We used to do that with a bunch of different things when I was a kid. But as a parent, and I was always driving all like 4 hockey players, and they were all over the place, and we would come up with prompts like as we're driving, whatever's going on around us, and we would use it in the story. And whoever's turn, like somebody would have to make like 2 sentences up, and then the next one would have to. And at first the kids would, I don't want to do this. But after they started, it became pretty fun. And then sometimes we would use the radio. And, I mean, you can do anything. It's just, if it's fiction. And I think it's fun, and it made trips feel shorter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And also you got the kids, involved in something other than, which, I mean, sports are great and important, but I liked that we could do something else with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. David, you brought something a little bit different to the story, and with your voice and telling that story, and that was really wonderful. What about? I know there are a lot of parents out there that may feel a little, I don't know, I'm not that person that can go on stage and get voices and all that other kind of stuff. But I'm imagining at some point in your life you might have felt that way. And how can you encourage parents to just kind of drop their guard a little bit and just kind of go for it and just throw themselves into it?
I will first say I don't think there was a single moment in my life when I didn't want to be doing that.
Okay.
However, to play on to your point, another thing I do outside of this is I teach after-school improv to kids in grades about 3 through 8 or so. And I'll get kids who don't have any desire to do anything. They don't know why they're there. Maybe their mom put them in something. And it's just, for many kids, the idea is they are ready to be active and stuff on the stage. They just need permission. They feel nervous about it. They don't know if it's okay to be as silly or as big or whatever. And, and my classes are all based on comedy improv, and so it's like you got to be as big as possible. And make that even a sillier thing. Go sillier. We're always saying, and that is what really tends to loosen up a lot of these kids. And I've had parents come to me at the end of the semester saying, this kid my child has been one of these quiet, he reads, does nothing but read, and he decided to take your class, and now he had us doing some of these games at a family gathering, and he's a lot more active and alive, and it's a lot of fun to see that kind of thing. So just give your kid the opportunity, give your children the chance to tell them it's okay to be silly and ridiculous, and usually they'll say okay and go for it.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, I was wondering, as someone who's teaching international students, and you're teaching kids in China, does the love of spooky stories travel around the world? Do you find that your students in China also love those spooky stories?
Absolutely it does. And, there's not complete overlap in what's available, but there are an enormous number of students that once they're able to speak to me in complete sentences, the first thing they want to talk to me about is Harry Potter. And so we have those conversations all the time, and I'm always pulling up GIFs on my phone so that when someone doesn't know, because, really of the words that I'm teaching, hippogriff isn't on the list, right? It's like class object. It leads kids to kind of, like David said, to want to put themselves out there, because what we're really trying to do is face-to-face communication, and to push a kid beyond learning a language in an academic fashion into actually speaking a language with another person. And stories inculcate this desire to do that, So I really think that storytelling is something very universal and something that we can use to connect to people around us with whom we might otherwise think that we didn't have very much in common.
Yeah. Kat, that's, I love that idea. How were you drawn to telling stories, especially telling spooky stories?
Well, I think as a kid, I was always kind of a storyteller. I would play a lot of games, at the table, during dinner with my family, and my brother hated playing the games, and I would find ways to trick him into playing. And so one of the games that I started was like, what would you do if? And I'd be like, what would you do if, a giraffe walked in the kitchen? And he'd be like, it's just stupid, I don't want to play. And then over time I would sort of pull it out of him, and then we would play. So I think that was always a part of my life, and I was always drawn to scary stories. I think a lot of kids are, because it engages your mind in such a way. I think you do get that description. It's easy to make a movie in your mind when you're reading. I was a classroom teacher, and I teach a lot of metacognitive strategies, which is just strategies about thinking, where you figure out what is my brain doing when I'm reading and I'm engaged, and then figuring out how to take those strategies and apply them when you're not engaged. And so scary stories are a great way to teach that, because there are so many things your brain is doing. And so I knew when I wrote, I wanted to write something that would engage kids' brains and just open up reading to them.
Well, you certainly do engage, and this story engaged my brain. I just absolutely loved it. Angie, what other kind of experiences have you had that drew you to this particular genre?
Well, I think I've always had stories sort of running in my head. I wasn't necessarily the storyteller that decided to tell them to other people. I just finally decided I'm going to write them myself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've always liked the kind of, maybe not the scary horror kind of stories, but spooky, supernatural kind of stories and I think that allows you to deal with all sorts of other things without really the reader having to be scared. If you're dealing with supernatural the reader knows, oh, that's not really real, but it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And you can solve a problem within that. It teaches them that they can have some control over what's going on. That they can be the little hero in their story. Yeah.
Interesting. Samantha, as Angie was speaking there, I'm thinking a scary story, especially reading a scary story, might be a safer way or a more comfortable way for a kid to start talking about a real life scary event.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's one of the great, that's like Kim was saying, talking about how spooky stories are good all year round. And in fact, most librarians that I talk to, when I ask them what genre, is requested the most, they say horror books. And I think there's part of that is because there's that fun, there's that anticipation of being scary, but beneath that, one of the wonderful things about spooky stories and scary books is that you can test your boundaries, but in a safe place. You can, when it gets too scary, you can close the book and you can put it away. There was actually, a friend of mine, her nephew read my book and she told me that he got to a certain point and he was really loving the story, but it was too scary for him, so he had to put it away. But then the next day he picked it back up again and he finished it off and he really loved it. But that's what scary stories allow us to do. We can, because it's within a book, we can put it away until we're feeling a little bit braver. But then we can also, because we picked it back up again, it built that braveness within us. And then we can take that braveness into the real world as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And especially for Christmas time has a history of telling spooky stories. I mean, the Christmas Carol, is a great classic spooky story for Christmas. So it's great to share these kind of things all year round.
Yeah, Victoria, one of the things that when I read the original Christmas Carol, I was amazed that it's a creepy, scary story. There's a lot of kids stories that have become kind of sanitized or Disneyized over the years. And, I mean, the Grimm fairy tales. I mean, when I read those original ones, I'm like, this is nuts. This is crazy. What do you think about that? Do you think that there's a value to leave that kind of horror in there? Do you think the stories lose something as they're kind of softened and again, used the term Disneyfied?
Right. I do think that people, since time began, have been using stories to teach and tell and share. And I do sometimes think when we protect kids too much or talk down to them, they're thinking about these things. They're thinking about what happens when you die or scary, or they're dreaming about scary things at night. And I sometimes think that when we sanitize their stories too much, we don't give them an opportunity to explore different ideas or concepts that they're already thinking about anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think most kids are fairly sophisticated, and I do feel like some of the stuff that maybe is too much for them, they end up reading over anyway. And as adults, we bring a lot of our own knowledge to stories when we read them that kids don't always bring to a story and are reading. So sometimes they can read something that we feel like is heavily loaded with all these other themes, that they just read it as fun or just as a beginning exploration of, they're kind of forming their philosophy on life and what they think about things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking of fun, Jonathan, I like I said, I love that twist and the humor that you brought to the story at the end. I'm one of those people. My niece Jimena. I mean, one of the things when we go to the movies and we usually see the superhero movies, but they'll oftentimes be showing the previews for the next slasher scary movie, and I just sit there laughing at it all. What is it that you bring so much humor into your stories? Are you and I just twisted? That we find humor in all this craziness?
I think, we talked about this, I think, one of the earlier podcasts. I love scary stories, But if you stop and just analyze them and look at them, a lot of them are just ludicrous. The things that happen. I mean, the teenagers running into the basement when there's no other way out to escape from the slasher, and just everyone, all the audience saying, don't go there, and of course that's where they're going to go, and let's stop and pick up the hitchhiker. So it lends itself to comedy. It does lend itself to humorous. As long as you still respect the genre, I think you could have fun with it and have some, put some laughs into it as well. And as long as you still maintain the scares overall. I just wanted to also say that my 12-year-old is watching The Haunting of Hill House, and I have not yet because I'm still too scared to watch it.
Well, it's pretty intense. And the thing about that was so intense is that there really aren't a lot of, jumping out kind of scaring. It's just getting into your mind, like you guys did, getting into the mind of Maya, just what's going on and who is that behind me, and just that's what scares me a lot, is like going into somebody else's mind and feeling their fear. Before we go, Kim, I just want to tell us, because I know there are teachers out there that want to get, if not the whole gang, into their classroom via Skype, one or two. But tell us a little bit about how your classroom visits work and where folks can go to connect with you and maybe make that happen.
Absolutely. We would love to Skype with every teacher, every classroom. They just need to head over to spookymiddlegrade.com and they'll see a section on our free Skype Q&As. So what we do is a 30-minute question and answer session. So we ask the kids to go ahead and prepare some questions about writing. They don't have to have read all of our books ahead of time. Of course, they sure can. That would be awesome. But just their general questions. And then we will go around and just do a little intro, talk about our books. We always do 2 fun facts so they can look forward to some really silly stories from each of the authors and some secret facts about us. And then we'll open it up to questions and they'll get to come up to the camera. We'll answer all of their burning questions. But also, since 30 minutes is really short, if they have leftover questions, we've started a YouTube channel, Spooky Middle Grade. So we will answer all of their leftover questions in a live video on our YouTube channel. And they can also go watch the recording whenever. So that's another fun thing that we started. And yep, just spookymiddlegrade.com. They can head over there, and we're looking to connect with as many classrooms as possible to share the love of spooky stories.
Well, that is wonderful. Talk about one of the best Christmases I've had in a long time. I have so much fun. We want to thank our guests, S.A. Larsen, Kim Ventrella, Samantha M. Clark, David Neilson, Angie Smibert, Kat Shepard, Sarah Cannon, Victoria Piontek, and Jonathan Rosen. Thank you all so much. We know we're going to be hearing from Samantha and David in future episodes, and I want to invite each and every one of you to come back on and have your own episode here on the podcast. Thanks so much for being part of the show tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was so great.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
We hope you've enjoyed this special spooky Christmas episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Imagine this, 9 award-winning middle grade authors came together to create a fun, spooky Christmas story just for all of you. An original story created just for you, the Reading with Your Kids podcast listeners. So much fun. Hey, we're going to get back to our regular format, and we have a really special guest for the next episode of the show. The holiday season, it is lots of fun and people are celebrating, but it's not fun for everyone. It can be a very difficult time. We have a wonderful guest coming in on the next episode. Her name is Melissa Lyons, and she's going to share with you a beautiful book called I Will Always Love You, which may just help some folks who have a difficult time dealing with loss, especially at this time of year, get through the holidays and understand that there is always hope and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's the next episode of the show. Melissa Lyons here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Well, we've come to that point of the show where it's time for me to thank my guests. So let me take a deep breath and get at it. We want to thank our guests from SpookyMiddleGrade.com, S.A. Larsen, Ken Ventrella, Samantha M. Clark, David Neilson, Angie Smibert, Kat Shepard, Sarah Cannon, Victoria Piontek, and Jonathan Rosen. And of course, we want to thank you. You are the person, you are the reason we are all here. And you are the reason your kids find so much happiness in the world. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. We'll be looking for you in the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.